Hi there, I'm Sherri Douville, CEO at Metagram, the mobile medicine company. I'm also editor of mobile medicine, as well as the forthcoming advanced health technology, both bestsellers in their categories, and series editor for trustworthy technology and innovation. And I'm here with one of our favorite people and co-author, Dr. Josh Tamayo-Sarver, longtime kind of informal advisor and inspiration to us, incredible experience in both clinical medicine as well as technology. And so I'm going to let Josh tell you a little bit about his role, his title, where he works, and looking forward to learning more about how we solve real problems in healthcare. I asked Josh to come here today because we share a passion for really both really not wanting to use buzzwords and really bust and fight back against them, because they just create an enormous amount of waste, noise, and distraction. And so we're both passionate about getting to the heart of how do we solve some of these incredible challenges that need to be solved for patients, as well as the relief that physicians need in the face of just incredible challenges, incredible workload challenges. And so with that, Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit about your title, a little bit about what you do, and then let's jump into the discussion of solving problems.
Oh, thank you. And thanks again for saying inspiration. It feels really nice to hear. So,
Yeah.
so clinically, I'm an emergency physician and I still practice clinically. And then I have a PhD in statistics and background in that from many years ago. And then I work for Vituity and Inflect Health, which are Vituity is a physician company. And we staff about 450 different hospitals throughout the land and go across most specialties. At Inflect Health, we're the innovation hub within Vituity, and I'm the VP of innovation there, overseeing, along with the rest of the team, corporate venture, internal incubation, and then partnerships and services. I'm sorry?
No, great. Yeah, it's an
Yeah,
amazing background. Yeah. I
it's
think
fun.
one thing I want to add is that you're the only person I've ever known for several years who actually went to Harvard, who I never knew went to Harvard. I always love to tell that story. And so it just speaks to your just tremendous humility in addition to your intellect. So please.
Well, I appreciate that. Some people would call it humility, others would just call it good reality contact. So either way. Um, so we were talking about buzzwords, which is the impetus for this. And
Yeah.
my pet peeve around buzzwords is that they are terms that have lost their meaning. So you don't know what it means when someone uses them.
Mm-hmm.
And because they don't mean anything really concrete and specific, they're that much more attractive to use, because when you don't want to think about what's the real value of this or what am I really saying, you just say, it's AI and it's tech enabled and the synergy is fantastic, right? Like, and it just allows you to
Exactly.
avoid any real talk and
Yeah.
sound like you're smart.
But the problem is we both know that for physicians, like immediately their BS radar goes up and their ears shut down. And so that's what we're talking about, solving for partly, right?
Well, and as a physician executive who looks at technology, we get pitched things constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been,
I
I mean, for
know.
20 years, I've been getting pitched, if someone came to me and said, hey, we have this new technology for 2 cents a year, it's going to channel the voice of God straight to your ear. Right. I'd say, oh, I've heard that pitch already today. Right. It's like we have been
No,
so overpromised. There is
nothing's too
nothing.
outrageous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
nothing too outrageous for me not to have been pitched that
Well, I
already.
don't know. I didn't see an NFT for Vituity, so I think you have had some sense of reality. Yeah.
Yes.
But you
And
you so you had a great example though about when we were talking about that essential, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges in this market is that you can be a rock star in technology and have great technical functionality, even great algorithms, and what's hard is that you have to make that create value in medicine, which means something much bigger and much different than actually just being a rock star in like a prototype context. And so you were talking about one example of, very worthy and valuable, worthwhile technical functionality, but then how to distinguish, like, does this really actually create value for stakeholders? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's kind of what I do all day long. So there's lots of different examples of it. And one that we were talking about was diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were talking about a hypothetical company hypothetical enough. And what they do is they go, okay, uh, what is it that would make me want to quit my enterprise job and sleep on a sofa and drink Mountain Dew and eat pizza and devote my life to this? And it's some inspirational thing, like I'm going to make diabetes care much better. I'm going to reduce pain and suffering. I'm going to make $1 billion doing it, and I'm going to make the world better. And I think that we used inspiration earlier. That's the inspiration that founders have, and a good founder really like feels that.
Yeah,
right?
They want to change the world.
They want to. I hope so, right?
Yeah,
and I hope they do. But then
yeah.
the problem from a practical standpoint is you go from, okay, so now what do I see when I look at this company? Their problem, what problem are they addressing? What's their total addressable market? All of diabetes, and the problem that they're addressing is they're improving diabetic care, right? And then you say, okay, well, what do they actually do, right? And they say, oh, we have this device. And let's say that they have a device that's like a Band-Aid, and it wirelessly connects effortlessly to your phone and tracks your blood sugar measurements every second of the day perfectly, right? And that their cost of goods and services is, $1 a year for this, right? We're like, that's the most amazing device in the world. But what they actually do is they measure blood sugar. Right.
Yeah.
And so the problem statement of we're fixing diabetes, well, what they actually do is they measure blood sugar. And then you go to a patient, you say, would you want us to measure your blood sugar constantly? Is that what you want in your life?
They have no idea. Yeah.
And they're like, no, what I want to do is I want to feel better. I want to live
That's
longer.
right.
I want to live healthier. I want to be able to eat what I want to eat, really. But right. Like, there's lots of things that they want, but measuring their blood sugar isn't it. Right. That's just a means to an end. And so the job to be done, which is kind of how I think of it, the job to be done that the patient has is they want to feel better. They want to not have their blood sugars high, so they pee all the time. Right. They want to live longer. They want to have more energy. Right. We all want the same thing, really. Right.
Definitely. Yeah.
And so measuring that blood sugar actually doesn't accomplish the patient's job.
That's right.
And then they say, okay, well, we're going to sell it to the health system. So they go to the health system and say, we can measure this blood sugar all the time for you. And, it's almost free. And the health system says, well, we care about that because we care about our patients. We want them to be better. But measuring their blood sugar in and of itself doesn't solve our problem. It's just a product. It's a small piece.
It's a functionality. It's maybe not even a product. Right.
Yeah. And what do we want? We want good glycemic control because we're paid for that on our HEDIS measures. And we know if we get good glycemic control, like the hemoglobin A1C measures, if we get that really good, our patients are going to feel better and be healthier. Right. And that is important to us. Right. Well, now as the tech company, you're like, but I have this amazing tool and technology and product.
I have an amazing widget. Yeah.
I have an amazing widget that's fixing diabetes care throughout the world, and no one's buying it. They just don't like technology. Right. And so when I look at that from a jobs to be done and from, these companies, when we partner with them, what we want to say is, okay, look, this is an important, amazing piece of technology you have, and we can build a context and a system around it to deliver the value that the user wants. So if we build a system where we're getting those remote monitoring measurements of the blood sugar, and then we're pairing it with a care coordinator who reaches out to the patient and says, hey, I see your blood sugars are going up. Is there some change in your diet or something? And the patient says, oh, as it happens, yeah, I've been at so many birthday parties lately. And you go, okay, well, maybe we need to have you on some sliding scale insulin when this happens, or comes up with something, or they say we can't afford our medication. And they reach out and they do something along those lines, or maybe they contact a clinician, and the clinician now says, okay, I'm going to titrate your medication for you.
Yeah. So the measurement just informs the intervention, but you still have to have a mechanism for the intervention to nail the job.
Right. And until there's a then what, you usually aren't addressing the job. And so when I think of it, I think of the patient has a job to be done, and that job is I want to feel better.
That's right.
The health system has a job to be done, and that is I want my hemoglobin A1C metrics to look a lot better.
Absolutely.
And then to accomplish either of those jobs, there's all sorts of steps that need to happen in them. And one of the important ones is that measurement of the patient's blood sugar.
That's right. Yeah.
But when that company who measures the patient's blood sugar presents their problem statement as we are synergistically co-designing, whatever, to improve diabetes care throughout the world, no one knows what to do with that. And it's just frustration and wasted opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. Thank you. And so we had been talking about, like I said, we were inspired by just our mutual passion for eradicating, buzzwords and the time that they suck, out of lives and effort. And so one question I had is that, we know that innovation is desperately needed in medicine. We really need to augment the workforce with valuable technology, but it needs to be done rigorously and thoughtfully. And so did you have anything more that you want to say about this particular model that you're expert in and that you're evangelizing?
Yeah, well, so one of the things that you and I were talking about was how do you uncover the job to be done?
Mm-hmm.
And I spent many frustrated years spending lots of time doing customer discovery and talking to fellow doctors and all sorts of people about what it is that they're trying to accomplish
Mm-hmm.
and what their problems are. And I actually learned that asking people what their problems are and what their pain point is usually not very productive. In the Henry Ford thing, if I asked my customer what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse. I actually think that's true.
I
don't
agree
think
with you.
I don't think the quote is true, but I think the sentiment is true that if you asked that customer, what's your problem? And they say, the problem is my horse isn't fast enough.
Yes.
But if you said, what frustrates you? What's your frustration?
Yeah.
They would say, I need to get to work faster.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And every frustration is a desire to accomplish something.
It gives you visibility, gives you visibility into the job.
Yeah. And when that desire to accomplish something, that is the job.
Good.
Right. And the fact that they're frustrated means that the current state isn't working for them. So when I talk to someone, I say, what frustrates you? For one, they love that because they get to unload. Right. And everyone like ask me what I'm frustrated about and, take a seat. I got a while. Right. And ask me what my problems are. It's like, I don't have a problem. You're the problem. Right.
No, that's great. That's great. Okay. And then our next question was, how does this framework, Jobs to be Done, which is a design thinking methodology for those design thinking enthusiasts out there. So how does it help you to discern solving a problem for a clinician versus sort of this shiny object widget syndrome that we were talking about?
Yeah. So I think a good example, actually, I wrote about it recently, was physician documentation.
Mm-hmm.
Right, like
all that's actually what stimulated me to initiate.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. So
that was a good one too.
So if you ask me, I have 3 night shifts coming up. So you want problems, I'll share all sorts of problems with you after those 3 nights, right?
Yeah.
But you ask them, like, physician documentation is a problem. And then you say, oh, so you want something else to write your document for you? Like, yeah. Like, how about ambient scribing to just like create a complete document for you? I'm like, yeah. Right. Ask me all those things. Ask me what my frustration is. And I'd say, well, what I want to do is I want to create a document. And they say, well, what is a clinical document? Say, well, that's a description of what happens. It's like, oh, so let's just hypothetically say if I were to have a video recorder and record everything that happened, that would be a clinical document. Well, no, that isn't, because I need medical decision making. And, every patient tells you they're dizzy. That doesn't mean I'm going to include it, right? Like, we're born dizzy or something. Everyone always says they're dizzy, right? So that doesn't mean that goes into my history necessarily.
I think the neurologist wants a word with you, but yes.
Yeah. I bet Art would say everyone says they're always dizzy. There's something about the word dizzy that just appeals to us. Anyway, what I really want is I want my expert clinical narrative and storytelling of what's going on. That's my clinical note. Right. And I draw a parallel to being like the judicial system, where you have a court recorder who literally records every single thing that happens.
Right.
But the judge still writes an opinion. And that opinion starts with a recitation of facts, and it describes their expert judicial opinion of what's going on and what the right answer is, even though there's a court recorder. So in healthcare, the EHR, the labs, there's a lot of thing that's kind of like a court recorder. But the physician's document is actually my expert interpretation of what's happening. And that means that the problem, right, my frustration isn't that someone isn't writing a note for me. My frustration is that it's so hard to get what's in my head out of my head and into a note that communicates to other people.
Yeah, that's great. So just to keep it like really generic and neutral, using the example of somebody following you around with just an old school recorder, right? Like a tape recorder, and asking, hey, this old school tape recorder listening to you, if they captured everything that you said, does that solve your job to be done in terms of how you think of needing, a clinical report?
Yeah, exactly. And the answer is no.
Right. Yeah.
Which should tell us that's the wrong problem.
Yes,
right?
I
That's
gotcha.
not the right
It's the
job to
wrong
be done.
definition of the problem. Yeah, and it didn't fully capture, the frustration that you're trying to solve, I think is what you're trying to say about using the model of jobs to be done. Right.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So one other question is that, or there's two more questions. The next one is, can you share an example where there is like a gap between, a promise, and a solution for something that you had experience using, or is that best described by the court reporter story, perhaps?
Well, the court reporter is a good one, but there's one of the ones that I like is we had a paging system
Mm-hmm.
put in so that instead of me asking the clerk to page the consultant, I could just page them myself,
Right.
right on my desktop.
The consultant specialist, you mean?
The
So
consultant
somebody,
specialist.
yeah. So
So,
somebody has like, heart rate, through the roof,
well,
that
so
you're
so
getting in touch with the cardiologist,
yeah,
right?
so I had
Yeah.
this happen, and this was a while ago now,
Uh-huh.
where I had a pediatric full arrest come into the department.
Mm-hmm.
We resuscitated the kid successful, so high fives all
We're talking
around.
about cardiac arrest.
A cardiac
Yeah.
arrest, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and a small child, and
Yeah.
I got the kid back, and I'm like, excellent. I think there's going to be a great neurological outcome.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Congratulations, thank God that happened. Now let me try and get them into the ICU. So
Right.
normally what I would have done is I would have gone to the clerk and said, can you page the pediatric intensivist for me?
Right.
Right. And instead I have this shiny new system. So I
Right.
go and I put in the system to page the pediatric intensivist.
Right.
Right. So the job seems to be that I'm
Getting in
paging
touch.
getting in touch
Yeah.
with the pediatric intensivist. And that's
Right.
exactly what it was designed to do.
Right.
And then I have a whole department. I still have to go see patients. Right.
Right.
Um, but I don't know if they got that message.
That's right.
So I'm still
Yeah.
anxious about it.
That's
So what
right.
do I do? I
Yeah.
go to the clerk and I say, hey, can you page the pediatric intensivist? Right. So if you think about the job to be done, there was actually multiple jobs there, right? One job
Yeah.
was to page the pediatric intensivist. The other was to provide me with reassurance
That's right.
and address my emotional anxiety that they are going to be contacted and nothing's falling through the cracks so that I can turn my attention to the next patient that I need to go see and take
That's
care of.
Yeah, that's well described. Yeah.
And and it made me think about like the Uber app,
Yeah.
right? And if you think about what job does the Uber app do, it gets you from point A to point B,
Yeah.
right? As as frictionless as possible.
Right.
That's all it's doing, right? That's the
Yeah.
job you would think it's being done. But when you look at the app, right, it tells you who the driver is and what the star rating is and what the color of their car is, and then it shows
Right.
you on a map how they're driving to you and where they're going. And if you think everything else is actually
It's a
just
peace of mind. It's providing peace of mind as
yeah,
to, yeah,
everything is
as
about
to
your
whether or
emotional
not you should
needs.
trust this driver and trust that it's going to come, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
And
great point.
and we tend in healthcare to completely neglect that and just expect people are going to use it and forget that they actually have emotions that need to be addressed to use it.
Yeah, that's that. And as someone who has, so much training in math, you're highly qualified to distinguish the importance of, emotions relative to math in terms of, physician adoption of
Mm-hmm.
technology. So thank you for that. And so in terms of like your advice to leaders, because I feel like, and I think you share this view that, propaganda and buzzwords are huge challenges in the tech industry in general. And then like when they, mashed up against medicine, what do we do about balancing the stakeholders' needs to really want to be literate in trends and feel like they're current, especially if they're popular buzzwords, but actually get the team to focus on real things that will drive real results for real people.
Yeah, I think for me, focusing on what job is actually being done, right? Like what job is being done, and then what value does that create,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
right? And then when you figure out what value that creates, you can figure out, can you capture that value,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I
And
like that
then
video that you sent. The Weird Al Yankovic. You
yeah,
you had advice about. Do you remember the advice about the video? Your advice was that to not ignore it, but to have fun in fun in a silo almost with buzzwords, but not to lead with them, right?
yeah. Well, and And, my wife actually makes fun of me for it because she saw the video and then she sees my slides. I have so many buzzwords on my slides because it's almost impossible to catch someone's attention without those buzzwords.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
just
so,
having purpose and using them wisely, I think, is your advice.
well, yeah. So my advice would be to understand um, when someone may be looking for those buzzwords because that's what they're attuned to hear, but then to actually have substance and specifics around what it is that you're actually doing and how that creates what that buzzword is aspirational about.
That's brilliant. I'm so stealing that. Okay, so just to round this out, and it's so slightly self-serving, but it was amazing work that you did in advanced health technology. You had a whole chapter on this jobs to be done methodology. So how can incomplete solutions be avoided? In terms of some of the advice that you provided in the book.
So I think going back to what we were talking about with the paging application, right? When you look at the job to be done, or when you look at the problem statement, you don't know what's happening. When you
Right.
drill it down to what job is actually being done, that at least allows you to figure out what component this plays into the full system. It's similar to that, or in our diabetes example, right?
Right.
Once you understand what that's being done and you understand the jobs that everyone is trying to accomplish, you can say, does this in and of itself accomplish that entire job? And if the answer is no, what other jobs do we need to build around it to get to that final one, right? So, for the paging system, it needed something to address my anxieties, right? So there were multiple
Yes.
jobs that needed to be done before I
Right.
would use it.
Yeah, I think that's great. So you're saying use the jobs to be done methodology to make sure that you understand, the dimensions of the job to make it useful.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you get into, people who are much smarter about it than I am, they do a pretty good job of explaining that there's the functional job to be done, there are emotional jobs to be
Oh,
done, there's
there's not.
financial jobs, right?
I've got a 2,000 item risk assessment for you on the non-functional job to be done. So
Yeah, exactly.
so that's true that there are a myriad of other inputs. So, well,
Yeah.
Josh, this has been incredible, and it was just such a wonderful contribution to our book. We also really appreciate that as well. So, thank you so much for your time and for this outstanding insight.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much for the opportunity to contribute to the book and to talk to you. I I always like talking to you, whether recording it or not.
Oh, that's kind. Yes, we'll do it again. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, sounds great.